Welcome, dairy enthusiasts, to another exciting episode of the Bullvine Podcast. I'm Bella, and with me, as always, is our resident dairy expert, Douglas. In our 186th episode, we're diving into a topic that's shaking up the industry: how innovative dairy farmers are outsmarting skyrocketing land prices.
That's right, Bella. We're talking about nothing less than a revolution in how dairy producers are securing land access. With farmland prices hitting an eye-watering $21,500 per acre in some areas, traditional ownership models are becoming extinct faster than you can say Holstein.
$21,500 per acre. That's incredible, Douglas. How are dairy farmers supposed to compete with those kinds of prices?
Well, Bella, unless they've discovered a way to milk gold from their cows, they're not. But that's exactly why we're seeing a new breed of dairy rebels emerge. These savvy producers are rewriting the rules of the game.
All right, let's break this down for our listeners. What exactly is happening with land prices, and why is it such a threat to dairy farmers?
According to January 2025 data from DreamDirt, Minnesota farmland now averages $8,364 per acre. But that's just the average. In Rock County, Minnesota, premium ground is commanding a staggering $14,400 per acre.
Wow, that's a huge range. Are other states seeing similar trends?
Absolutely. Missouri is even higher, averaging $15,171 per acre. And Purdue University reports that Indiana's top-quality farmland reached $14,392 per acre in 2024, jumping 4.8% in just 12 months.
Those are some mind-boggling numbers. But you mentioned Wisconsin earlier with that $21,500 figure. Is that for real?
It is indeed, Bella. Prime farmland in Wisconsin is now fetching up to $21,500 per acre in some areas. It's a perfect storm of investment groups, urban expansion, and even solar companies, all bidding on the same patches of dirt.
This sounds like a crisis for dairy farmers. How are they supposed to expand or even maintain their operations with land prices like these?
That's the million-dollar question, Bella. Or should I say, the $21,500 question. The truth is, traditional models of land acquisition are no longer viable for most dairy operations. As Tom Wilson, a third-generation Wisconsin producer, puts it, when land costs $14,000 an acre, that's over $950 per cow just in land investment for a grazing operation. The dairy establishment won't admit it, but the numbers are terminal for conventional expansion models.
So if conventional models are terminal, what are these innovative producers doing instead?
This is where it gets interesting, Bella. We're seeing a whole range of creative strategies emerge. Let's start with what I call guerrilla leasing.
Guerrilla leasing? That sounds intense. What does that involve?
It's all about flipping the traditional power dynamics with landowners. Instead of fixed cash rent, some producers are implementing profit-sharing models, where landowners receive a percentage of milk revenue tied to crops grown on their land.
So it's like turning the landowner into a partner rather than just a landlord.
Exactly. This approach creates true partnerships that can weather market volatility together. It's a stark departure from America's rigid, fixed-rate leasing traditions that leave dairy producers exposed during market downturns.
Are there other creative leasing strategies farmers are using?
Yes, some producers are going even further with what amounts to reverse leases. They're offering complete land management services to absentee landowners in exchange for below-market rental rates. We're talking $150 to $200 per acre in some cases.
That's clever. They're essentially monetizing their agricultural expertise, right?
Precisely. These dairy rebels are securing long-term land control at roughly half the going rate by leveraging their knowledge and skills.
It sounds like these strategies could be particularly helpful for younger farmers trying to get started. Are there any approaches specifically aimed at generational transition?
Indeed there are, Bella. We're seeing a rise in intergenerational leases. Instead of selling at peak prices, forward-thinking landowners are securing their retirement through long-term leases to next-generation producers. It's a win-win that preserves agricultural legacies while providing secure returns.
These individual strategies are fascinating, Douglas. But I understand some farmers are taking things even further by working together. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely, Bella. This is what I call collective power, and it's one of the most exciting trends we're seeing. Across the Midwest, groups of dairy families are breaking conventional molds by forming LLCs with non-farm investors to purchase farmland collectively.
How does that work exactly?
These structures often have majority farmer ownership, supplemented by investor capital. It creates alignment while distributing financial requirements more manageably. It's similar to models we've seen succeed in European dairy regions, where farmer cooperatives routinely pool resources to acquire land collectively.
Are there other collaborative approaches gaining traction?
Yes, we're seeing an uptick in land contracts, where producers negotiate directly with landowners for seller-financed deals. This bypasses traditional lenders entirely and can result in substantial savings.
Can you give us an example of how that might look in practice?
Sure thing. Let's say a dairy operation is purchasing 200 acres at $10,000 per acre, so that's a $2 million total. With a seller-financed contract at 4% interest instead of a commercial loan at 6%, they could save approximately $40,000 annually in interest.
That's significant savings. How does that translate to milk production?
Well, Bella, that $40,000 in savings is equivalent to the margin from producing about 400,000 pounds of milk each year, roughly the annual production of 20 good Holstein cows.
Now, Douglas, I've heard some buzz about dairy farmers partnering with solar energy companies. That sounds like an unusual alliance. What's that all about?
Now we're getting to what I consider the most radical approach emerging in dairy land strategy. Forward-thinking producers are leveraging the renewable energy boom to subsidize their land costs through something called agrivoltaics.
Agrivoltaics? That's quite a mouthful. What does it mean?
It's a fancy term for combining agriculture and solar power generation on the same land. The University of Minnesota's West Central Research and Outreach Center has been studying this approach, and the results are impressive.
What kind of benefits are they seeing?
Well, not only do the solar panels generate revenue, but they also help reduce heat stress in cattle during summer months. Their research shows that with panels providing strategic shade, body temperatures in grazing cattle can drop by up to 10 degrees during peak heat.
So it's not just about the extra income, it's also improving conditions for the cows.
Exactly. And the financial impact is staggering. Solar leases typically pay $900 to $1,200 per acre annually, far outstripping what most marginal land could generate through conventional dairy.
That's remarkable. Are many U.S. dairy farmers adopting this model?
U.S. dairy has been a bit slow on the uptake, Bella, but we're seeing European producers in Germany and the Netherlands embrace it enthusiastically. Japanese dairy regions have taken it even further, with some farms integrating solar infrastructure directly into barn roofing and cattle shade structures.
Now, Douglas, I know you always say that sometimes the most innovative thing a farmer can do is stop doing something. Is there an example of that in these land strategies?
You've hit the nail on the head, Bella. One of the most damaging myths in modern dairy is the notion that successful operators must control their entire feed supply chain. We're seeing smart dairy farmers abandon vertical integration entirely.
Really? But isn't controlling your inputs important?
It can be, but it's not always the most efficient use of capital. The most profitable dairy operations globally are focusing on milk production while securing feed through strategic partnerships. Dutch dairy producers have been doing this for decades, operating highly successful milk production systems on minimal land footprints.
How are American farmers adapting this approach?
We're seeing progressive dairy producers sell cropland and invest those proceeds in modernizing dairy facilities, or expanding their herds. They're securing feed through contracts with neighboring crop farmers, maintaining supply chain security without the capital burden of land ownership.
Healing. So they're essentially becoming dairy specialists rather than trying to do everything.
Precisely, Bella. As one innovative producer put it, the future belongs to dairy specialists, not agricultural generalists. European producers figured this out 30 years ago, while American dairy is still clinging to the homesteader fantasy where one family does everything. That model is dead. Specialization is the only path forward.
It sounds like American dairy farmers have a lot to learn from their international counterparts. Are there other global strategies we should be looking at?
Absolutely. The Netherlands, for example, has long emphasized cooperative land ownership models, where multiple dairy operations share access to grazing land through formal associations. New Zealand pioneered the share milking model, where young dairy farmers without capital gain access to land and cows in exchange for labor and management expertise.
These all sound like great ideas, Douglas, but for a farmer listening right now, feeling overwhelmed by land prices, what concrete steps can they take?
Great question, Bella. I've got a 5-step dairyland survival plan that every producer should consider. 1. Conduct a ruthless land efficiency audit. Calculate your return on invested capital for every acre you own or rent. European dairy audit protocols suggest you should generate at least a 12% annual return on land assets or consider alternative arrangements. 2. Initiate strategic conversations with neighboring landowners today. Most land never hits the open market. Regular conversations with aging farmers can position you favorably when they consider selling or leasing their property. 3. Identify potential coalition partners in your region. Modern land acquisition often requires collaborative approaches. Find other progressive dairy operations interested in joint ventures or cooperative land access. 4. Contact solar developers proactively. If you have marginal land that's underperforming financially, explore solar integration. And 5. Reassess your business structure through a succession lens. Consider converting to entity structures like LLCs or S-corps that facilitate phased equity transfers over time.
Impressed. That's a comprehensive plan, Douglas. It really underscores how much dairy farmers need to think like business strategists these days.
You're absolutely right, Bella. The dairy rebels who adapt fastest will dominate the industry for decades to come. The question isn't whether you'll change your approach to land, but whether you'll do it proactively or be forced into it by your lender.
Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, pun intended. From guerrilla leasing tactics to solar grazing, it's clear that innovative dairy producers are finding ways to thrive even in the face of sky-high land prices.
Indeed, Bella. The key takeaway is this: high land prices aren't the end of dairy farming. They're the end of conventional dairy farming. The future belongs to those who can separate land control from land ownership and deploy their capital where it generates the highest returns.
Thank you, Douglas, for this eye-opening discussion. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of the Bullvine Podcast. Remember, in the world of modern dairy, sometimes the most revolutionary act is refusing to play the game by the old rules. Until next time, keep innovating and keep milking.